I feel like I keep going back to the Clio legal trends report, but I was just reading it for so long. It's a pretty big report. And
Yeah,
I want to
this
ask,
year especially.
yeah. And so I have it like bookmarked on my computer because I go through sections of it. But from your perspective, and I think this will be really interesting because you're you. What was the most surprising thing that you learned in gathering results for this year's report?
Yeah. Man, as you commented on, this year's legal trends report was a monster. And, I think maybe one of the most surprising results for me was a bit of a shift in terms of the past reports we've published. We've often talked about the fact that there's this chasm between consumer expectations and how lawyers were delivering legal services. And this year's report, for the first time ever, really, I think highlighted the fact that we're actually seeing a shift that is helping drive lawyers and consumers closer together rather than further apart. And that's kind of a macro level take on the report. But one of the overall messages that the constellations of data in the report tell us is that COVID-19 has pushed consumers to a more online world. They're consuming, buying goods and services primarily online, and their desire for consuming services from legal providers that offer their services online has gone through the roof. And then when we look at the data from the lawyer's side, when I look at this data, one of the ways I frame this is thinking about the legal trends report data for lawyers' adoption of technology. To me, it looks like it's a report from the distant future. Like, if you handed me the data that we were looking at in this year's legal trends report back in January of this year, I would have told you that this data must be from the year 2030 or so. Like, I really believe we've seen a decade or more of transformation and technology adoption in lawyers and law firms. And you just look at the data where you look at the adoption rate of cloud solutions. You look at the adoption rate of Zoom and video conferencing tools. You look at the amount of facility that we see lawyers demonstrating when it comes to all of these online technologies, electronic payments, Zoom calls, you name it. It's really a punctuated difference from what we saw in February or January of this year. So this I think has really helped push, through an external force, and back to our original kind of conversation around the kind of like evolutionary biology take on the macro environment that COVID-19 has imposed on both consumers and lawyers has really done a lot to push them closer together than they were pre-pandemic. It's equipped consumers with the tools and technologies and mindsets where they're more comfortable working with lawyers online. And we've seen law firms adapt to operating online. And again, those are going to be, it's not every law firm, but those are going to be the law firms. And again, the message, the signal that comes through very strongly in the data from this year's legal trends report is the law firms that are making that shift and embracing those cloud-based tools, embracing those client-centered tools, are winning in a really definitive way. And those dividends are going to continue to pay off over the next decade, because this is a permanent shift in consumer expectations and a permanent shift in terms of how they want to access legal services. So for me, that's the number one takeaway from this year's legal trends report. And the most surprising result, the fact that we are, for the first time in 5 years of doing this report, really starting to see an opportunity for consumers and lawyers to be a better fit going forward, thanks to some of the macro level changes that COVID-19 has driven.